The governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, has accused his fellow governors of abandoning his administration in its face-off with the Nigeria Labour Congress. The governor made his point during a virtual meeting of Nigeria Governors Forum of Wednesday. At a meeting too, a committee set up by the Nigerian Governors Forum recommended the petrol price of between 380 naira per litre and 408.5 naira per litre, and critically called for the immediate removal of fuel subsidy. Workers in the state have begun a 5-day strike last Monday over the governor's retrenchment of 45,000 workers and the alleged anti-labor policies. Tunde, your views on this?
Well, the awkward moment when you confuse your colleagues for your friends. I do feel for Governor El-Rufai on that score, complaining about the lack of support shown to him by his fellow governors. You don't complain about things unless you had an expectation. And he's been disappointed by that. He feels on his own, apart from the governor of Bayelsa State. And that's sad. However, the fact still remains. I still don't agree with the mass retrenchment on his terms. It's fine to reduce the cost of governance, the over-bloated government. I've been consistent about that. But the Nigeria labor law demands that they should be paid a redundancy package. And that has not been done. I hope that now that the federal government has waded in, some kind of, rapprochement can be broached and everybody leaves happy. Now, regarding the fuel subsidy issue, Governor Rufai really seems to be on a clean sweep mission. He headed this 6-person committee, and they've come to the conclusion that it's time to finally do something about it. And petrol price should now be raised to 385 naira for very clear reasons. The amount of money, the billions that are spent every month subsidizing consumption, it doesn't make any sense. You can't fault the logic. But we come back to that issue, the thorny issue of the hardship that a lot of Nigerians will face, and that cannot be easily dismissed. They also suggest that the federal government should invest in 133 buses to be shared across the states. That seems to me like just scratching the surface. What's 133 buses really going to do for anybody? And it takes me back to the NSAS, the aftermath of the NSAS protests. When you recall, hoodlums went around burning BRT buses, causing destructions worth billions of naira. And I think about it now and think about how we are so reckless with infrastructure in this country. Well, some of us are the criminal-minded. And it costs the average consumer. It doesn't cost anybody else. The people that they were trying to, protest against, those hoodlums. It's actually your fellow Nigerian that you actually make to suffer. Because 133 buses is not going to do anything. 335 naira at pump price is ruinously expensive for a lot of Nigerians. And that fact cannot be ignored.
Well, the two issues. Let's take the El-Rufai issue first. The governor of Kaduna State, participating in a virtual meeting of the Nigerian Governors Forum yesterday, was blaming outsiders for his own omissions, for crisis in his own state. Now, what did he expect his colleagues, governors, the other governors to do? To come to Kaduna State and also carry placards against the striking labor union workers? They issued a statement. Actually, the Nigerian Governors Forum intervened to issue a statement calling on, what is it called, the labor union to exercise restraint.
Yes.
Okay, but he says that was neither here nor there, and that, the Nigerian Governors Forum was playing both sides of the conflict and was, in his estimation, neutral. Well, he didn't tell us specifically what he expected his colleagues to do. Should they also follow his example and retrench workers in their own states so that it will be seen to be a solidarity of governors according to workers? I think he made a point about federalism, and he needs to be reminded that in a federal system, look, states have their own, options. They have their own differences. They have, it's not the same formula for every state. Village meeting. So, but in any case, Governor El-Rufai, who is very clever, seized upon that and went to town. Another point that he made is that this is not about unionism. He made that point, but that it is politics. That in fact the crisis that he has with the labor unions in Kaduna State is being sponsored by another governor. So who is that governor? Who is competing? Who is governor in his own state? They will be competing with the governor of Kaduna State. What will be his ambition? To displace Nasir El-Rufai. So, I think, look, when they hold these meetings, we like to hear important, outputs from meetings of people who are governing Nigerians, not people turning the Governors Forum meeting into some kind of village beer parlor session where people just make all kinds of frivolous allegations. So I think that the bigger concern is that the federal government decided to wade into the labor crisis in Kaduna State, and it was on the basis of that the Nigerian Labour Congress decided yesterday to suspend the strike. And a meeting is supposed to take place today in Abuja to look at the issues with the federal government of Nigeria as the mediator. But I've also seen a press release from the Kaduna State government saying that they will not attend that meeting except the Labour Congress and the Electricity Employees Association decide to restore electricity supply in Kaduna State. Now, I don't say it, and the governor was boasting that he would deal with the Nigerian Labour Congress and that he will put an end to labor unionism in Nigeria using Kaduna State as an example. And he was even engaging in scaremongering, telling his colleagues that after Kaduna, they too will have their own problems. Look, I don't get all of this. Yeah. I think the Kaduna State government should go to that negotiating table that has been put together by the federal government of Nigeria and put his matters there and allow third parties to help to see how the conflict in Kaduna State can be resolved. That is that. As for the increase in the pump price of fuel, just a few comments, because I know Rochus Ojiri will still bring up the matter and we will trash it further. Well, I hope that those who are proposing 385 naira per litre and 113 buses in exchange for the hardship that will occur should learn from history. In 2012, we had something called Sure P. Under Sure P, we also provided palliatives, but it did solve the problem. But there will be more comments on this later when we have another opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abati Antungu, for your comments. I mean, it's just funny that our Governors Forum has become a circus. That's all on News Headline. We take a short break. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. Let's quickly move to our dependable Rochus Ojiri. Rochus, it's great to have you.
Great to be here. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Doctor. So I mean, it's the front page of today's This Day newspaper. Manuel Feni is going to go through it. Very, very great report there, looking at what's been going on with the Nigerian governors taking charge, as Doctor would say when OG comes on. If you look, this was corroborated by. Let's look at a tweet from Governor Fayemi. If you look there was a communique that they released, and in that communique, it actually corroborates the source that spoke to this data, amounted to the front page report that we've seen in today's newspaper, whereby it's a 4-page communique. Point number 11, they highlighted the fact that Governor El Rufai, who is just, he's everywhere, right? He noted that, according to his calculations, subsidy costs anywhere from 70 to 210 billion naira per month. And so that is why the Nigerian Governors Forum is now, essentially supporting this report headed by the committee headed by El Rufai, which, by the way, includes the Central Bank Governor, Godwin Emefiele, and some other notable members of President Buhari's economic team. So look, and as we look at this is the virtual meeting that they had yesterday, where they talked about all these issues. And by the way, the Governors Forum also expressed support for El Rufai in the ongoing conflict with labor unions. It's part of the communique as well. They've also appealed for peace on both sides, but it's there. So the thing is this: where I heard Tundu earlier, where she said she doesn't support the retrenchment without paying them what is due. This is all about money. And when we think about the fact that the Nigerians need to be cushioned, when you look at a 385 per litre, that is higher than what NNPC, Mele Kyari said it should at least go up to, I think he said 234, so this is a more than 100% increase. So the importance of a deregulation cushion, I talked about this, last week or 2 weeks ago. The issue that El Rufai is facing with the unions, it's about money. So if you remove the subsidy and you get the savings, imagine an extra 70 to 210 billion. Pass on those savings to the average Nigerian on the street. As far as the civil service is concerned, maybe it won't go through everyone, but at least from grade 1 to 7 or 1 to 8. that saving should be passed on. That will help, because my goodness, if this goes through, and I expect to see resistance from Labour, but the timing of this, you have to admit, it's very interesting, because Labour is distracted by El-Rufai right now. So they've slipped this in quickly, you know, and now, because Labour is supposed to be talking to government about this thing now, Labour will fight this. I know there will be resistance, but if you think about the impact of 385 naira per litre on inflation, 18% is nothing. We're shooting past 20 to 25. Inflation, cost of transportation, purchasing power. I mean, look, it's disposable income. You must pass on the savings from the subsidy to the average Nigerian on the street. That is how you will solve this. One more thing. President Buhari is in Paris asking for debt relief. There's so many good stories in this day newspaper today. It's at the top. Mr. Emmanuel Feni will go through it. He's asking for debt relief from foreign countries while you're paying fuel subsidies in Nigeria. So the little income that you have that is being constrained by your debt service, you are still paying. So, I mean, the logic doesn't follow how you can ask, so please reduce the amount of money I'm borrowing from you, while in Nigeria, you are still paying fuel subsidies that are constricting your little income that you're able to get from oil. So it all comes down to this subsidy matter. The governors they are mini CEOs, mini presidents of their respective states. The governors need to take responsibility, pass on the savings to the average Nigerian. That is how you cushion the blow from this increase.
Important point there, a very important distinction there, Rotus.
All right, Rotus, so I want to harp on that. Great point you made. But what are the governors saying? They say they want to buy 133 buses.
113, I guess.
113 buses for a country that spans across 923,000 square kilometers. I'm sure if you met the number of buses Egede Dilichukwu and a couple of other guys have, there are more than 113 buses. So these guys think it's a joke. That's the problem. And that's why sometimes you wonder if there's any form of logic in the thinking. Dr. Bati, God bless you, as always. I mean, you cited the point of Shopee. Shopee was even more robust than this same package that these governors are putting. Shopee had the graduate work scheme program. They had a couple of other schemes. But it didn't work. Did it cushion the effect? No. The inflation that burgeoned up after that incident in 2012 is still evident in our economy. Since that time, we've not been able to go back to the single-digit inflation rate, the target we set for ourselves of 9%. Now, under Sanusi, the last time we went to a single-digit was under Sanusi, single-digit inflation rate. So we are ×2 the inflation target we set to themselves. And you know, when the central bank sets an inflation target, it is in its best interest to keep it below the target. But when it goes ×2 above the target, and you are bringing in this consequence again, then it becomes a big problem. No doubt, it doesn't make economic sense to continue the subsidy. But you see where a lot of people differ is the case of trust. Nobody can trust these guys. You give these governors the windfall from this subsidy, they're chucking it in their pocket, and in 5-10 years down the line, they start to return it as loot again to Nigeria. like they return they're like returning the Bori loot. They start to return the money as loot again. So it's the insincerity that is making a lot of people cry. And for me, I think what we are doing in Paris, it's another aiding and abetting colonialism, junketing around. I don't know when African leaders will stop being aids to colonialists. It's as if they are just spokesperson for colonialists all over the world.
Okay, since
we borrowed money, we have to pay it back.
Yeah, fair enough. Since 2012, the argument has been on the table that the deregulation, that the subsidy regime, in the downstream sector is not sustainable. Now, we have had again and again to return to that argument. And about 2-3 months ago, Timi Presiva came forward, followed by the NNPC, that's the Minister of State for Petroleum, that again, we have to realize that it is not sustainable. At a theoretical level, we all agree with that. But now, this same year, the NNPC, in addressing the same issue, had said, one, there is ongoing negotiation with Labour, and that until that is concluded, government will not talk about deregulation of the downstream sector, right, or a realistic, appropriate pricing. Has that negotiation with Labour been concluded? If it's not been concluded, 385 naira, that 385 naira that is being, proposed could be a problem, right? Because Labour will rebel. Naturally, Labour will rebel. So is anybody thinking of those consequences? Two, we were told by Chief Timi Presiva also that there was a plan to put in place gas, compressed natural gas, which will be an alternative to petrol and diesel, and which will be cheaper for the people. Where are we with that? Right? 3, NNPC came forward and said that they may not take a final decision with regard to petroleum subsidy until there has been a rehabilitation of the refineries and optimal capacity has been achieved. Those refineries have not functioned for about 2 years, right? So these are the key issues that will need to be resolved. But all of this is still at the level of proposal. The National Economic Council will consider the matter, and I guess that, it is after a decision has been taken one way or the other that we can begin to worry.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, Rotus. Really appreciate you. We'll go for a quick break. We'll be right back. Morning. Welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rising Channel. We'll move to Michael. Michael Wilson, real quickly. Michael, great to have you. Good morning.
Thanks very much. Good morning. Just looking at what happened to the fall in equity markets yesterday, a lot of concern about a more activist approach by the Chinese regulators towards cryptocurrencies, Ethereum down, Bitcoin and the rest of it. I'll come on to that in a second. Also, slight concern about the Fed's apparent lack of urgency about what it's going to do about inflation and so on. But again, we'll come on to that. Very mixed messages. So Asia Pacific stocks then mixed this morning. Japan exports surge. Those are the headlines. Nikkei up about 0.1%. Mainland China stocks not doing a great deal. China kept its benchmark rate unchanged as people expected. In Australia, Qantas is cutting costs again, announced new cost-cutting measures. It would report an annual loss before tax of more than $1.5 billion, suffering as most airlines are because of the obvious. Added that its debt pile, though, has fallen down. What it's actually going to do is have a year-long wage freeze for its staff, and also less commission for travel agents, and offering voluntary redundancies to its cabin crew on its international business. So on to Bitcoin then, and a wild ride yesterday. Okay, so that's the price that it pays for limited supply, lack of a central bank. It's what people in the financial markets now call it like a nascent. It's a nascent asset class. It's looking for its discovery price. It hasn't found it at the moment. It will continue to do this. It's suffering, with China cracking down on crypto transactions, the tailwinds of Tesla. Decision no longer to accept Bitcoin as payment, and also tweet-inspired record climbs with Elon Musk and so on. Massive retracements are scary. Seasoned investors will probably ride them, but, get used to it, basically. If you're not experiencing these things, you are going to gain a lot of money, and you're also going to lose a lot of money. Pretty obvious. COVID is strangling supply chains. Fresh waves of COVID in Asia could hit supplies, particularly of semiconductors. We're talking about US and China mainly suffering from these kind of things. And no surprise that the US is lobbying. We'll talk more about this on the Global Business Report. We wrote us later on today that US is lobbying the South Korean President Moon Jae-in to release the Samsung chairman Lee Jae-jong from prison, because Samsung is the largest chip maker in the world. And the US is saying, if you don't free him, because the US wants more semiconductor chips, then our strategic alliance will probably be threatened. ByteDance, a co-founder, has quit. He's TikTok owner's ByteDance. He's the Zhang Jiming said he'd be replaced by his junior. Remarks it's a big shake-up at that particular company. Here's what he says. This is classic management speak. The truth is, I lack some of the skills that make an ideal manager. I'm more interested in analysing organisation and market principles, leveraging those theories to further reduce management work, rather than basically what he's saying is, I don't like talking to people. Well, good for him. Anyway, so he's off. He'll have a happy retirement, no doubt, or he'll do something else. The Fed can't win. That's the message from the FOMC yesterday. What were they actually saying? They stayed talking about super easy money management until our goals are achieved, as they put it, while at the same time fraying a lot of nerves by not talking, and I say use that double negative deliberately, not talking about tapering and where their support is going to go. So what's the takeaway from it all? Well, on the one hand, this is what economists say all the time, isn't it? The thought is the Fed isn't being proactive enough to cover the concerns of rising prices. And then the other, there's a concern that it might tighten too early. So it can't win, basically. Fed, I don't think a great deal has changed, quite honestly. Last night's Fed minutes didn't say a great deal to me, I have to say. The biggest problem is the economy. It is filling the number of jobs that people don't want to take. We've talked about this before on the programme, because they're getting nice unemployment benefits. Thank you very much indeed. When will it begin to taper its stimulus programme? Maybe later in the year. That we didn't get a great deal. Again, not a good time to be looking at things. As I keep saying, later in the year is the time when we ought to be taking note of all these kind of things. Microsoft is to pull Internet Explorer. Yeah, it never actually got to be a verb, did it? It's not very catchy as the Internet Explorer. It's not like I'm going to Google this. I'm going to what am I going to do? I'm going to Internet Explore this. I don't think so. So, indeed. So therefore, it's fallen behind both Chrome by Alphabet and Safari from Apple and so on. Here's a good one for you. The US, now, don't you like revenue services like this? Apparently, US revenue posted stimulus checks to people who used to work in the United States and now live in Japan, which naturally caused an enormous amount of problem at local Japanese banks when their customers turned up with dollar checks and said, would you mind cashing this? And the cashiers were a little confused. Anyway, very nice of the US to do that, and something will be sorted out. I wish that our revenue services were like that. Big shake up in railways here. It's going to be called the GBR. No, not the Global Business Report, but Great British Railways. It'll sell timetables, it'll do all the stuff and so on, flexible season tickets and the rest of it. The unions are saying the whole thing should be taken away from its still complicated thing of having private train operators running on a public rail network. Discuss. Always been a problem in this country. UK online commerce, e-commerce companies are facing big VAT bills from the Brexit split up, and as far as they're importing stuff into the EU, it did apply to many companies, including a lot from China, but now Brexit also applies to the UK. Big ranges and big losses for oil as far as commodities are concerned, basically crushed oil markets overnight because of the cryptocurrencies. So in other words, basically those people who are long of oil sold off. I mean, it's as simple as that. They saw what's happening with equity markets and cryptos and the rest of it and felt discouraged and sold it off. Again, just a market thing, nothing to do with demand or supply or anything more fundamental than that. And gold in a $40 range, but basically unchanged. It's been moving around, been trying to work out, like most of us has, what the FOMC was saying. Turns out it wasn't saying a great deal. So basically ended the day unmoved. That's your global view.
Well, quickly, Michael, the Williams Sharp's Ray plan for the United Kingdom. Yes, reform has been a major issue in the rail sector. And now what you now have with this plan is a unified central control. But if I was living in the United Kingdom, my concern would be what is in it for the average user of rail services in the United Kingdom. Any advantages beyond the attempt by government to reverse the 25-year-old privatization plan, which now gives more control to GBR, as it has been identified, which will now control network rail and also the provider of service. And very quickly on the Colonial Pipeline, we've been told that they paid $4.4 million as ransom to DarkSide, that criminal group that disrupted fuel supply. Well, the head of Colonial Pipeline says he had to give approval for the payment of the ransom because he thought that was in the best interest of the United States. So are we now likely to see a ransom payment for people who are very smart in cyber attacks?
On ransom, your guess is as good as mine. What he actually said was it was a highly controversial decision, but it was the right thing to do for the country. Well, I don't know about that, because in the past, the US government has absolutely specifically said, do not pay ransoms, corporate America. So I don't know. Basically, he couldn't do a great... It's very, very vulnerable. I said in the past, the way to deal with this is to get ex-hackers on board and get utilities protected, because of course it's going to happen again. If $4.4 billion can be paid in $4.4 million rather paid in ransom using Bitcoin or whatever they paid it in, then of course it's going to happen again. So you've got to be brave and you've got to say no, bluff them out. That's what they do. But again, ransom's been going on ever since and nobody's actually come to an answer to it. Will it open more opportunities? I think it probably will. As far as the railway's concerned, I didn't get two things from it. First of all, will fares come down? Doubt it very much indeed. Will we start to travel again on railways? Do we want to be cheek by jowl with people once again, ever again? Do we want to get on rush hour trains? And believe me, they have to be crowded for the companies to make money. It's just a reshuffle as far as I'm concerned. I don't really care who runs it. I just want them to be on time and I want to pay less for the privilege of face-to-face into somebody else's armpit. That's what rush hour's like.
All right, thank you so much, Michael. But some updates on the Colonial story. They did pay 75 Bitcoins. And secondly, the dark side group was also hacked of that Bitcoin they received from Colonial. So that's the sad part of the story. I mean, and that just corroborates your point that we should get hackers on board. But thank you so much for your time as always, Michael. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adesua Moro is here with us. Adesua, great to have you.
Thank you, Rufai. Good morning, all. COVID-19 has infected more than 165 million people globally and has claimed at least 3.4 million lives. There have also been about 1.5 billion vaccinations across the globe. Here in Nigeria, 43 new cases were recorded in the last 24 hours in 6 states. Lagos posted the most infections. No COVID-19 related deaths were recorded in the country, according to the official statistics. Now, despite having limited vaccine jabs in the country, inoculation is still ongoing in some parts of Nigeria, including here in Lagos, where the first phase was extended by 2 weeks. The NPHCDA data shows that 38,351 persons received their first jab of the AstraZeneca in the last 24 hours. To Malawi, where the country has now destroyed 19,610 doses of expired AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccines. The vaccines expired mid-April. The bond vaccines were the remainder of 102,000 doses they received on March 26. Last month, you will recall that the World Health Organization urged African nations not to destroy expired vaccines, but just this week, it reversed that decision, recommending that they should be safely destroyed, describing it as a regrettable decision. EU member states have agreed to reopen the bloc's borders to travelers who have been fully vaccinated against coronavirus. The ambassadors who met in Brussels also agreed to increase the level of new cases a country can hit before declaring such a country unsafe. That measure would open up travel more to the EU from more places. There are currently 8 countries on the EU's safe list. The recommendation, of course, will be needs to be adopted by EU ministers, and we hear that will take place tomorrow, Friday. Finally, the Pan-American Health Organization, PAHO, says COVID-19 infections have dropped across the Americas, with the most dramatic improvements seen in the United States due to mass vaccination in the country. Head of PAHO, Carissa Etienne, however, warns that there are glaring gaps in vaccine distribution in the region, with the lion's share, of course, going to the United States, while just 3% of Latin Americans have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. PAHO is also saying that despite the drop in infections, Caribbean islands such as the Bahamas, Haiti, Trinidad, and Tobago saw COVID-19 deaths double in the last week.
Well, quickly, let's start with Malawi. Now, Malawi had served notice in April that it was going to destroy those COVID-19 vaccines because the data had expired. The WHO and the African Center for Disease Control said maybe they shouldn't. They advised that maybe they should, still use those vaccines. But Malawi said, well, according to their own rules in their country, they will not administer, expired vaccines, because that in itself could promote vaccine skepticism, vaccine hesitancy, and create a crisis. But look, what we're dealing with is the capacity of many of these African countries to administer the vaccines that they received. It's not just Malawi. Democratic Republic of Congo had the same problem. South Sudan had the same problem. In fact, South Sudan also had to destroy some of the vaccines they could not administer. So the issue is, one, of capacity, poor transport networks, financial challenges, lack of enough personnel. And these are issues that we've always talked about the fragility of the health infrastructure in Africa. How do we solve this going forward is a major challenge that Africa faces. Yes, many of those countries were delayed by the fact that the AstraZeneca vaccine had issues and it was suspended for about 2 weeks. But vaccine rollout in Africa is something that governments, leaderships, have to look at.
I'm really troubled by Malawi. I thought at some point the WHO had announced that expired vaccines should not be destroyed, but I guess this burning of the vaccines is to bolster public trust so that people know that they're not going to be exposed to expired drugs. But it does make me cringe. You know, when I'm sure, I don't know how old you were at this because I'm much older than you, but when I was young, they used to tell me, you've got to finish your dinner because there are children starving in Ethiopia. So this reminds me with the burning of the vaccines, there are people who are desperate for these vaccines elsewhere in the world and they're just being burned. It's like the burning of the books with the Nazis. I find it really upsetting. What do you think should be done with this issue of burning vaccines and just wasting such a valuable resource now? Scarce commodity.
Just to reiterate that the WHO changed its stance this week, and I have a part of that statement. It says any vaccine that has passed its expiry date, including the COVID shield, should not be administered. While discarding vaccine is deeply regrettable in the context of any immunization program, the WHO recommends that expired doses should be removed from the distribution chain and safely disposed. The WHO is also in with Malawi on this, that we do have a standard because every drug, including vaccines, do have expiry dates. And that is the only way you can improve confidence in these drugs. Even though India, we remember, had said, Serum Institute had said, there's now an extension of expiry on these vaccines. But the WHO is saying that doesn't make any sense at this time. And we have vaccine hesitancy on our hands. Let's destroy it. It's unfortunate, but we have to destroy it. Again, they are saying there was a time lag from when these vaccines arrived in the country and when they should have been used. So it also boils down to preparation of these countries. You have to receive vaccines. You should put processes and procedures on ground so that when these vaccines arrive, you hit the ground running. We don't have enough vaccines on our hand, and then we have to destroy the little we have. It's unfortunate.
And this story just makes the point for me, as I always make, that it is not about waiving intellectual property rights. It might be part of the problem for nations to ramp up capacity, but it is not about that. It is about putting the logistics in place and putting the platform in place to be able to get the vaccine from factory into arm. That's the most important thing. And you can see it's just a clear case of lack of logistics, lack of preparation, lack of investment in the healthcare sector. Malawi, you talk about one of the poorest countries in the world. So once you don't put all of this investment in place, even if you get over the amount of vaccines you want, you will waste it. And that's what Malawi is doing. So, and that's why I feel our African leaders are not going to France to ask for the right thing. I don't even believe it's right to be going to ask France for the right thing in the first place. I think what they should be asking for, and the global solidarity should be about logistics and ramping up production.
Manpower as well.
Manpower. Because if you ramp up production, even if you make the vaccines in Belgium, it will still get to every part of the world. It is possible to get. It's just because you don't have the logistics and the productive capacity in place. That's why the vaccine doesn't get to the necessary parts of the world. Anyway, and that's what we should talk about.
The main issue was that these African countries, many of them were not prepared for the vaccine rollout. You recall that even some of the vaccine doses that were meant for Africa had to be donated to Jamaica. Only 2 countries in Africa said that they had the capacity, Togo and the Gambia, to administer the doses that they were given. In fact, I saw a report indicating that even Nigeria said had to give up some of the doses to be donated to Nigeria. So we need to do a lot more in terms of resources, capacities, preparedness, and also the leadership in these African states.
All right. Thank you so much, as always, Adesu Amora.